Hi, I'm Michael Loughran. I'm going to be reading from a memoir called Widower, which is a finalist for the 2025 Big Other Book Award, thanks to John Madera and thanks to the Cleveland State University Poetry Center for publishing this book. Widower is a memoir about grief and love. It tells the story of the year in which I lost my first wife to suicide and fell in love in that same year. So it tells the story of that surprising new love. I'm going to read a little bit from kind of the middle of the book from a chapter that's talking about my experience avoiding and then at long last reading Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. The chapter functions kind of like a hinge in the book. I happen upon a criticism of the book I'm reading, something the book doesn't do. And when I return to it, all I can do is wait for the book to reveal its inability to do this one thing. I've killed it. I don't actually care what the book does. I just wanted to read it. I drink a tequila and think of movies. I only wanted to read the book, but then I encountered the book-killing essay, and here we are, vulnerable to essays, real losers. I drink a tequila, I think of different movies, I feed the cat whenever she wants. I think of my friends and family, the TV passwords we share. I'm trying to read the book by Joan Didion, which is canonical in the genre and which I resisted all this time. My friends have ways of determining why a book is bad, but I almost always like a book and finish it. I know there are bad books in the world, poorly written and affected, but I don't seem to come across them. When I read a book, the only assumption I make is that I'm in love with the writer. I read a book, pick my nose, drink a tequila on ice with lime. Clink goes my finger in my nose when the drink is empty. Until my early 20s, I assumed every book was self-help, which is why I liked books, even though I hadn't read many. They helped. They helped the self. But this was, as they say, a misapprehension, which college can be good for adjusting. Books were all sorts of things, hardly ever self-help. There were such things as self-help books, but you shouldn't read them. In fact, there is no self, a fact which you had to learn from books. Now I was 21, 22. One thing I didn't know until today is that Joan Didion actually wrote 2 grief memoirs, which is a way of saying I didn't know she experienced 2 tragic bereavements, first of her husband, The Year of Magical Thinking, and then of her daughter, Blue Nights. I resisted the first because I wanted to write my own. I didn't technically resist the second, unless not knowing is a resistance, and maybe it is. I Googled the Joan Didion Corvette picture, but I Googled badly and came across the book-killing criticism. I don't mean the criticism is correct, necessarily. What I mean is I started reading in order to reach the place of my inevitable disappointment. I guess it's thrilling to say what's wrong with Joan Didion on the internet. I could have disregarded the criticism, but that's not the type of reader I am. I'm trusting. I used to think it was crazy how easily my classmates knew a writer was wrong or stupid. What the writer overlooked, didn't have the guts to say, or was ignorant of. Almost every writer, it turned out, is wrong and stupid. It was thrilling for me. At some point in class, usually the first 5 minutes, somebody would begin to enumerate complaints, and by the end, we had really degraded the book, pulled the pages out, made them frail, noticed how frail and shit-smelling they truly were, foul, and above all, stupid. I was 24, 25. You aren't ready to say that, I say to my students, which they don't like hearing. Classrooms are where teachers struggle to become the parents of their students' ideas. I'm just begging them to slow down. Why do you dislike everything? I'll say to no one in particular. You're like my old classmates. Can someone please just tell me what's happening without criticizing it? Please, I say, by leaning myself dejectedly against the doorframe. I'm 41, 42. I'd done so well resisting the Joan Didion book, but then I gave in and started reading it. And then I Googled badly and killed it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Who is saying what to whom and why is what I ask my students, cautiously over the din of their criticisms. When Noelle died, I took a leave. I went to Los Angeles. When I returned, I felt like a bag of spiders. A good reason to resist the canon is the likelihood that Joan Didion already said it, a bag of spiders. But who can live on a diet of masterpieces, said my old teacher. I think of Tasia's husband, the strangest person I know, who somehow managed to publish a book of new ideas about Hamlet. As I was finishing the year of magical thinking, I was trying to remember my own time in Los Angeles, and I thought looking at the picture might help. I knew I would never be able to find my copy of her collected essays, the one with the famous Corvette picture on the cover. It was down in the basement in a box, as good as gone. So I Googled it, but Googled badly, and that's how I came across the criticism. In Los Angeles, there was a little back stoop behind the apartment where I'd smoke in the mornings. There was always broken glass back there I didn't want to be blamed for. It seemed to me some kids were probably tossing beer bottles over the fence into the tiny yard, carpeting it in broken glass over time. I remember standing up from the stoop and walking over to the plastic lawn chair, and I remember sitting down and doing something dramatic, which was Googling the famous picture of Joan Didion. I had to brush the broken glass off the chair. I had never read a book or even an essay by Joan Didion at the time, but I associated her with Los Angeles. I hand-swept the broken glass and behaved dramatically. The pizza on the roof of Mikhail's car, was that dramatic too? I made the famous Corvette portrait my phone's wallpaper. Every morning there was more glass, more glass. I said Joan Didion said she felt like a bag of spiders to you because it's thrilling to lie. It's hard to remember what happens, how it's all said, and sometimes you pick up later on the page than where you left off. Imagine those gaps. Joan Didion may have written things you skipped or had thoughts that she didn't write. How would you know? How did you get a new idea about Joan Didion? I wanted to ask the critic. How did you find something missing inside of what's already mostly gone? You are the strangest person. I love you. Thanks.